We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace, and I'll read it for you. It goes on to say, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles, and...
Behind the towering, gilded gates of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of solemn tradition usually dictate every whispered word and measured step, a quiet storm had been brewing long before the ink ever touched paper. It was an ordinary evening in London, yet the silence hanging over the royal quarters was unnerving, heavy with an unspoken tension that senior palace aides could neither ignore nor manage. For months, the public had seen only carefully orchestrated public appearances, warm smiles, and impeccably timed royal waves. But behind those grand oak doors, the fragile foundation of the modern monarchy was being tested to its absolute limit. King Charles III sat alone in his private study, bathed in the dim amber glow of a desk lamp, staring down at an official legal document that would soon send seismic shockwaves to the entire global commonwealth. The document was not merely an administrative memo or routine scheduling update. It was a formal sovereign royal order, a binding directive that sought to strip Queen Camilla of her Royal Highness privileges permanently. To understand the sheer magnitude of this moment, one must understand what the style and status of HRH truly represents within the British royal family. It is not just a prestigious label or an ornamental title attached to a name on an official letterhead. The style of Her Royal Highness carries profound constitutional weight, signaling senior rank, official state recognition, immunity from certain public scrutiny, and a direct connection to the sovereign's divine and institutional authority. For Camilla, who had spent decades enduring fierce public criticism, harsh tabloid scrutiny, and relentless judgment following the turbulent decades of the late 90s, earning her place as Queen Consort had been an arduous, uphill battle. She had meticulously reshaped her public image through quiet dedication, unwavering support for Charles, and tireless charitable work. Yet, in one sudden, devastating move, the very monarch she had stood beside was signing away the formal symbols of her royal standing. As news of the king's decision leaked through the restricted corridors of the palace, the reaction among senior royal officials was one of total disbelief. Advisors who had served the crown through multiple decades and historical crises scrambled to assess the fallout. There had been heated debates and deep personal disagreements within the royal household before, but nothing had prepared the inner circle for a decision of this magnitude. This was not a dispute over royal protocol or seating arrangements at a state dinner. It was a decisive act that challenged the core concepts of loyalty, duty, and marital partnership at the highest level of state. When Queen Camilla received the news in her private quarters, away from the prying eyes of press, the impact was deeply personal and emotionally shattering. Sources close to the inner household recall that the atmosphere turned instantly cold. The woman who had given up her privacy, weathered intense public hostility, and dedicated her later years to preserving Charles's emotional stability, now faced the grim reality that her formal position was being fundamentally altered by the man she loved. Meanwhile, Prince William found himself thrust into an incredibly delicate and precarious situation. As the Prince of Wales and the direct heir to the throne, William understood better than anyone that decisions made by the reigning monarch are rarely contained within the personal sphere of a single family. Every royal order, every shift in protocol, and every internal rift inevitably impacts public trust, constitutional stability, and the long-term viability of the crown itself. William was caught between his filial respect for his father's ultimate authority as king and his deep concern for the emotional unity of the royal household. He recognized that if an internal crisis of the scale were to leak to the press in an uncontrolled manner, it could irrevocably damage public confidence in the institution he was destined to inherit. High-level emergency discussions began behind closed doors, where senior advisors and family members attempted to navigate the complex maze of unresolved emotions, competing expectations, and institutional preservation. The root of this drastic decision did not emerge overnight. It was a culmination of years of hidden friction, shifting palace dynamics, and strategic reevaluations regarding the future representation of the monarchy. For years, quiet disagreements had been buried beneath formal royal ceremonies and rehearsed public engagements. However, palace insiders point back to a pivotal private gathering, a closed-door winter meeting at Sandringham, where long-standing tensions finally erupted into open confrontation. During that fateful meeting, away from cameras and public relations staff, harsh words were exchanged regarding royal priorities, public perception, and the future direction of the royal brand. What was meant to be a private discussion to heal growing divisions instead exposed deep-seated fractures that never fully healed. For Charles, carrying the immense weight of the crown meant making agonizing choices where personal feelings had to be subordinated to institutional duty. The king lived with the constant pressure of maintaining the monarchy's relevance and moral authority in a rapidly changing world. In his mind, the sovereign royal order was not an act of malice or personal betrayal, but severe, necessary measure to protect the long-term integrity and public perception of the throne. Yet, for Camilla, no amount of institutional justification could soften the blow. To her, the removal of HRH status felt like an implicit betrayal of her decades of service, a painful reminder that despite everything she had sacrificed, her place in the royal hierarchy remained subject to cold political calculation. The atmosphere within the royal household rapidly deteriorated as silence turned into bitter conflict. The usual polite exchanges between palace staff and royal figures were replaced by tense whispers and anxious speculation. Every staff member understood that they were witnessing a historical turning point, a moment where the personal lives of the royal family collapsed into constitutional crisis. William continued to act as a cautious mediator, trying to prevent an all-out public relations disaster, while urging both his father and stepmother to consider the lasting consequences of their actions. The past had finally caught up with the present, and as the reality of the king's signature began to settle in, the royal family was forced to stand on the edge of an uncertain future, knowing that whatever happened next would alter the history of the British monarchy forever. The morning following the signing of the order brought no relief to the tense atmosphere that had settled over the royal residences. The sun rose over London, casting long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace. But inside, the mood remained dark and unyielding. News of the king's decision was no longer just a whispered rumor among high-ranking courtiers. It had become an undeniable reality that required immediate operational and strategic adjustments. The royal household, an intricate network of private secretaries, press officers, and administrative staff, found itself working under extreme pressure. Every document, official protocol, and upcoming public engagement had to be reviewed to reflect the change in Queen Camilla's formal status. Behind closed doors, the emotional weight of the situation began to manifest in sharp exchanges and heavy silences. Camilla spent much of the day in her private quarters at Clarence House, surrounded only by her most trusted personal aides. The sudden turn of events had left her reflecting deeply on her decades-long journey alongside Charles. She recalled the immense personal cost of step-by-step rebuilding her public reputation, moving from a figure targeted by public hostility to a respected queen consort, carrying out essential duties for the nation. To see that hard-won recognition altered with a single legal document felt like an overwhelming setback, raising painful questions about whether her loyalty and sacrifices had ever truly been valued by the broader system surrounding the crown. At the center of this storm, King Charles carried a burden that few outside the immediate royal circle could fully comprehend. As monarch, Charles was bound by a deep sense of duty to preserve the authority and moral standing of the institution above all personal relationships. In his view, the modern monarchy faced unprecedented scrutiny, and maintaining public trust meant taking decisive, sometimes harsh actions to streamline royal affairs and address underlying tensions before they escalated into public scandals. However, the personal cost of this institutional mindset was devastatingly high. Those close to the king noted that he appeared noticeably aged and fatigued, torn between his responsibilities as sovereign and his deep affection for his wife. He understood that his decision had created a deep emotional rift within his home, one that could not be easily repaired by formal explanations or legal justifications. The tension was further compounded by Prince William's active involvement in the unfolding crisis. William, fully aware of his responsibilities as heir to the throne, held several private meetings with his father to discuss the broader implications of the order. William recognized that internal instability within the senior ranks of the family posed a direct threat to the future of a monarchy. He argued that public perception was fragile, and that any sign of division among the core members of the royal family could invite relentless media speculation and erode public confidence at a critical time for the crown. As the days passed, details of internal discussions began to highlight the complex dynamics that had led to this historic moment. It became clear that the signing of the order was not the result of an isolated argument, but rather the culmination of months of underlying disagreements regarding royal roles, public exposure, and institutional strategy. Advisors had debated the long-term impact of maintaining certain royal privileges in an era where the public increasingly demanded transparency, modesty, and accountability from the royal family. In these high-level discussions, differing views on how to balance tradition with modern expectations had created sharp divisions among palace officials and family members alike. Camilla felt that her contributions to supporting the king during his transition to the throne were being overlooked in favor of cold, strategic calculations. She expressed her frustration during private conversations with close advisors, questioning why her position had to be sacrificed to appease internal palace factions or abstract public relations strategies. The feeling of isolation grew as official arrangements were quietly altered, serving as constant, uncomfortable reminders of her changed reality. Despite the growing emotional distance, the necessity of maintaining a unified front for the public remained an urgent priority. The royal family was scheduled to attend several high-profile public events in the coming weeks, and palace press officers worked tirelessly to draft statements and manage media inquiries. The challenge of hiding severe internal conflict behind professional smiles and grand ceremonial appearances weighed heavily on everyone involved. William continued to play a crucial mediating role, attempting to bridge the communication gap between his father and stepmother. He urged both sides to focus on the long-term stability of the family and the crown, cautioning against allowing personal grief to destroy the fragile balance that kept the royal household functioning. However, as preparations for official announcements moved forward, it became evident that the emotional damage was profound. The palace had survived constitutional shifts and public controversies in the past, but this internal crisis struck at the very heart of the family's personal relationships. The signing of the order had set in motion a sequence of events that no one could fully control, leaving the future of the monarchy hanging in a delicate, uncertain balance as the world watched from afar. The final countdown to the public announcement created an atmosphere of quiet resolution inside the walls of the palace. As the administrative reality of the sovereign order took hold, King Charles, Queen Camilla, and Prince William were forced to confront the ultimate truth of their situation. The storm could no longer be contained within private drawing rooms, and the decision would soon belong to history and the judgment of the public. After days of emotional confrontation and intense internal debate, a subtle shift began to occur within the household. The initial shock and bitterness gave way to a somber acceptance that the institution's survival depended on how resilience and dignity were demonstrated during moments of profound internal change. Camilla, in a quiet moment of personal reflection, came to recognize that her enduring legacy as a royal figure would not be defined merely by formal titles or official protocols, but by the quiet grace with which she handled this unprecedented turning point. She chose to focus her energy on her long-standing patronages and public service, demonstrating that her commitment to the duties she assumed alongside Charles remained unbroken, regardless of any shift in her formal recognition. For King Charles, the emotional weight of signing the document settled into a deep, reflective understanding of his role as monarch. He realized that leading an ancient institution into the modern era required making personal sacrifices that few could ever fully comprehend. Protecting the crown's future meant bearing the weight of public judgment and accepting the painful emotional distance it created within his own family. In private conversations with Prince William, the king expressed his hope that this difficult measure would ultimately strengthen the monarchy's foundation, ensuring that the institution remained relevant, transparent, and grounded for the next generation. William, observing his father's burden and stepmother's quiet endurance, recognized that leadership within the royal family required a delicate balance between institutional duty and human compassion. The Prince of Wales understood that his future reign would be built upon the lessons learned during this crisis, reinforcing his determination to serve as a bridge of stability and unity for both the family and the nation. When the official statement was finally released to global media, it triggered an immediate wave of intense public discussion and international headlines. Commentators, historians, and citizens around the world analyzed every word of the palace announcement, debating the far-reaching implications of the king's historic decision. Supporters viewed the move as a bold demonstration of modern monarchical responsibility, proving that the crown prioritized public confidence and institutional integrity above personal privilege. Critics, on the other hand, questioned the severity of the order and expressed sympathy for Camilla's decades of dedicated service. Yet, as the initial public frenzy gradually subsided, the image that remained was not one of permanent destruction, but a royal family standing together amidst profound transformation. The crisis had tested the inner circle to its absolute limit, but in facing the painful reality head-on, the monarchy demonstrated rare, vulnerable strength that resonated deeply with people across the globe. In the end, the removal of Her Royal Highness privileges became more than a controversial headline. It served as a defining moment of transformation for the modern British crown. It proved that the true strength of the monarchy lies not in unyielding adherence to status or ancient titles, but in its capacity to adapt, endure, and preserve its core sense of duty to the most challenging personal and political storms. As King Charles, Queen Camilla, and Prince William stepped forward into a new chapter of royal history, they did so with renewed understanding of their shared responsibility. The ink on the royal order had dried, the titles had been altered, and the history books had been rewritten, but the dedication to public service and the quiet endurance of the royal household remained firmly intact as the world watched the crown move resolutely into the future.